Hello and welcome to another weekly update, and big news this week, if you have been living under a rock somewhere, is that Microsoft have acquired GitHub, or they are in the process and going through the motions of acquiring GitHub. So big news in our space as developers. GitHub being the massive repository where we keep all our code, and I've already done a video about this. I did like an intra-week video because the news was that big, just talking about it and giving my reasons why I thought it was a good thing. I'm overall very positive about that, and since I've done that video, there have been a number of announcements that have come out of Microsoft around how they plan to treat GitHub going forward that just make me more and more positive about the whole news. So you can go and see that video if you want, and there's a blog post I did about it as well. So but yeah, it's overall good news, I think. So I'm not going to talk any more about that because I've already done that at length, but that's been the kind of big news of the week. But there have been some other things going on as well that have maybe not found your attention so far, so hopefully I can help bring those to you now. The first is a change to LUIS, so the Language Understanding and Intelligence Service, which is part of Microsoft Cognitive Services. So that's part of Microsoft's machine learning and AI kind of toolkit for developers. And what LUIS does is it's all about taking sentences or utterances that users or people give you and working out what the intent of that is, so that your application can go and do the right thing, and you're not relying on things like trying to do keyword matching and horrible stuff like that. So LUIS is the service, and there's a new feature that's just been added to LUIS called patterns. Now, if you use LUIS, you'll know all about intents and entities, and what you may have found, especially if you do any kind of very not advanced, but like where you have a lot of entities, or maybe entity with a lot of intents, perhaps, and it starts to get confusing about where those entities are within sentences, within utterances. That's what patterns are there to help you solve. So patterns allow you to provide a pattern to an utterance. So there's a really good blog post put out by the Bot Framework team, which I will link to, that uses sort of locations as the example. So what's the distance to London? What's the distance to X, Y, and Z? That's a pattern that you can tell LUIS about. So LUIS understands that in an utterance that looks like blah 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 to location, that is maybe different from an utterance that's blah 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 from a location to a location, and you could treat those two things separately. So that's what patterns are for. The blog post goes into some detail about how they fit into entities, how they fit into intents, how they fit alongside those things as well. But it's worth knowing that if you do anything with LUIS, it's worth knowing that patterns now exist. And if you're running into this scale problem, then it might be that patterns are just the thing you've been looking for. So that's that. Talking about new features, another blog post from the Teams team, but it's sort of about bots still. And that is that you can now send and receive files in Teams, and you can do that with the Bot Framework. So that's potentially really interesting for Teams developers. I will do a blog post about this at some point. Time is against me at the moment, so I wanted to include it in this weekly update so that you knew it was a thing. And besides, anyway, there's a really good blog post by the Teams team on their blog site about it as well. So what this means is that you can send and receive files with a Teams bot. Why is that interesting? Well, it opens up a number of different scenarios. Let's pick a classic one, expense tracking. You want to upload your receipts. You can now do that with a bot. So you can send files to the bot. The bot could actually do clever stuff like look through the receipt, pull out the numbers, pull out the expense line items, add it to a spreadsheet. All these things are possible. Or the bot could send you files. So the bot could send you a file. There's a number of different things you can do as well. You've got Microsoft Graph, so you've potentially got integration into OneDrive as well. So you could use it as a mechanism of either submitting files into OneDrive or into Flow, perhaps. Also getting files out of OneDrive. So you could make some kind of interface for OneDrive, and you could say, send me the file that I uploaded yesterday, into the drafts folder, and actually you could have code that looks through that and works out what you meant and sends the file back to you. You could do that on business specific things, so it could be access to a company-wide OneDrive account or SharePoint or something like that. So it could be, send me the expenses file for last week for company X. There's a number of different things you could do, but being able to send and receive files is it's a really good thing. It's going to open up a lot of opportunities for app developers, I think. So very excited for that. All right, and the last thing I want to point you at is something I haven't yet listened to, but is my weekend homework, and that is the latest episode of UC Inside Track. So if you don't already listen to UC Inside Track, you should. It's run by Pat Richard, and this episode is all about dial plans and normalization rules. And it would not be a podcast about dial plans and normalization rules were it not featuring Ken Lasko. So you definitely want to listen to this episode, I am sure. I haven't listened to it yet, but without listening to it, I'm going to tell you that it's going to be very, very good. It's going to be lots of detail about dial plans, normalization rules, and probably also about Ken's Skype Optimizer tool. So you should definitely listen to that. Even if you don't care anything about dial plans or normalization rules, which as a developer you might not, that might just be purely IT pro stuff. But it's worth understanding how all that stuff works, and it's worth looking and listening to Ken as he talks through it as well, I am sure. I'm saying all that, I hope it's not rubbish, because I haven't listened to it at all, and here I am recommending it. I have a feeling it's going to be a very good episode. So I'm going to leave that with you as your homework for the weekend. I'm going to go and do it as well. I'm going to wish you a very good weekend, and I will speak to you again next week.